Welcome to Biological, the podcast, where science, the soul, and perception meet to inspire you to live a more biologically aligned and fulfilling life. My name is Nellie, and in this podcast, we'll explore the intelligent design behind the human body and the meaning within our experiences. Through the lens of German new medicine and perceptual change, we'll look at symptoms, emotions, and life events not as problems to fix, but as purposeful biological responses and soul alignment. My intention is to inspire curiosity, self-trust, and a deeper understanding of the remarkable intelligence your being holds. These conversations are also not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any medical conditions. They are for the purposes of intellectual conversation and education only. Hey guys, and welcome into episode 2 of the Biological, the podcast. Having some fun so far. And this next topic is, again, I was going to say it's really close to my heart, but so was the first one. Definitely close to my heart, though. I'm going to call this episode Boundaries and Bandaids. And where we're going with this one is, you often hear in the holistic health world, like, oh, it's just a Band-Aid, or, maybe it doesn't really have a place here. And for sure, when it comes to the context of GNM, GHK, our perspective is that medications and even a lot of supplements and even a lot of holistic therapies are just Band-Aids because they are not getting to the root cause of the issue, which from our perspective would be a DHS, Dirk-Harmer syndrome. So we're looking at that shocking, isolating, acute event that sets off adaptations in the organ. And so then medication might make someone feel better. Even holistic therapies might make someone feel better, but are we actually getting to the root cause of the issue? So that's the kind of context of Band-Aids. However, what I would say to that is that they do have a time and place, and then boundaries. So one of the most life-changing things that has been shared with me was again from John Demartini. And he says that we only put boundaries in areas of our lives where we are disempowered. Now, that statement goes greatly against what most of the modern self-help, spirituality, holistic health community says, right? So often we hear in that world, like, set your boundaries, make sure you're firm on your boundaries, protect your boundaries, get clear on your boundaries. And definitely I was in that world for a long time. Now, when this statement was shared with me, initially the feeling was like, ooh, it was very confronting, to be completely honest. But there was also, I think it was confronting because there was also this hit of truth in it too, and have since shared that statement with numerous other people in my life, and mostly people have the same reaction. We only put boundaries in areas of our lives where we are disempowered, and yeah, most people will cringe at that. Really interested to hear how you guys are responding to that. Let me know in the comments, let me know via email, whatever it is, however you want to get in touch. I'm really interested to know how that lands for you now and how it lands at the end of this podcast, and if it's something you'd even like to explore more. So we only put boundaries in areas of our lives where we are disempowered. Let's have a look at this. However, again, I would say just like Band-Aids, boundaries do have a time and place, okay? So boundaries and Band-Aids, they've got a time and place. But from my perspective and from where I'm at in this current moment, they are elements of disempowerment. Right. So if we put a Band-Aid on, or if we take something to suppress a symptom or feel better, and if we put boundary in place, are we in a position of empowerment when we do those things? If you really think about that, if we think about even victim perpetrator model, which seat would you have to be in to be putting in place a boundary? So a boundary is something that protects, right? A boundary says you can't come here, or I'm not going outside of this. It's a fence, a barrier, a wall, a stop point. It is effectively a protection point, just the same as a Band-Aid or a a medication that stops symptoms and promotes comfort, right? It is a way of saying, stop. I'm not going any further in this discomfort. It's a wall, it's a barrier. So it is a protection. Now, who needs protecting? Someone who is a victim or someone who doesn't have a challenge and a problem. And if you think about that, the only person who really needs to put a boundary in place or a Band-Aid on is someone who is disempowered. They're in the seat of victimhood. They're saying, I need to put in a stop point. I need a wall, a barrier, a protection. And so this statement profoundly changed my life when I started really, really leaning into this and looking at the areas of my life where I was putting in place boundaries. And once I started observing those places and really working in those places to bring myself out of that victim seat, things really started to shift. And what my realization was is that if there is no perceived attack, there is no need for a boundary. And one of the most significant places of this for me in my experience was, again, I've spoken about some family dynamics in episode 1. I was really having to set firm boundaries with family in that experience. So things like blocking emails, blocking texts, blocking social media, those sorts of things, right? And I thought in those moments that I was acting in an empowered way. I was going, I'm not engaging with you in that way anymore. But that statement in itself implies that there is some form of attack coming in. It says, I see a part of you that I don't like, that I'm not willing to accept, that I feel threatened by. So I'm putting this stop wall in place. And then when I started working to, again, we spoke about this in episode 1, go back and rewatch, re-listen if you haven't caught that one. Once I was able to own the things in myself that I was judging in them, once I was able to see the benefits of the perceived attacks that I was experiencing from them, then the need for the boundaries fell away because I no longer perceived the experience as something threatening. And so I was able just to release those boundaries. And it was shortly after I started just quietly letting those boundaries dissolve that things really started shifting with the dynamics in our family. It's not entirely resolved yet. I hold it in my heart that one day that will come to full resolution, and I am still a work in progress as well, so I continue to chip through the layers. There is no end to this, people, just so you know. But once I started dissolving those boundaries and not experiencing things as an attack, the dynamic itself started shifting. So where I say that there is a time and place for boundaries and Band-Aids is, and we say this in GNM, GHK too, right? Sometimes there is a place for medication. Sometimes there is a place for surgery. Sometimes there is a place for antibiotics. Sometimes there is a place for all kinds of treatment, right? They have a time and place. If the discomfort of the individual is so gone so far that the individual can't, you get to that point where you can't even gather your thoughts. You can't even think clearly, see clearly. You're in so much pain, so much discomfort, be that mental or physical. Then sometimes there is a place to put that barrier, that boundary in play, right? And that gives us, I guess, what I would say, breathing space. It gives us breathing space to be able to recalibrate, to be able to go inside self, to think, to work things out, to do your own work so that the inner dynamic can shift. Therefore, the external dynamic can also shift. So there is definitely a time and place for both Band-Aids and boundaries. However, where we need to be mindful is how we put those boundaries in place and for how long we put those boundaries in place. Because this is where, in my opinion, things start to get a bit twisted and we can end up often unintentionally creating and causing more conflict than was there in the beginning. And we can create that for ourselves, but we can also inadvertently create that for other people. And at the end of the day, We had a conversation around this with the last live Foundations Plus cohort students as well. At the end of the day, we can't control how everyone thinks, what everyone thinks, how people experience things, but we can do our best, and we can go into situations, conversations with the best intentions possible, right? Like, I do believe that that is part of our responsibility in this lifetime, is to interact with others in the most integral way we can with the best intentions at heart. So boundaries and Bandaids, they have a place, but what happens when we put a boundary in place? And I'm going to talk more about boundaries than Bandaids in this situation now. What happens when we put a boundary in place that is very sudden, very harsh, very isolating, and where we can run into trouble as well is, again, the self-help world here, right? Set your boundaries, being clear on your boundaries. What I'm observing is that boundaries have become a form of bypassing. Boundaries have become an excuse not to deal with stuff that needs to be dealt with. Boundaries have become an excuse not to take responsibility for effective communication. Boundaries have become a real excuse and actually something that is based in selfishness, not in empowerment. And this was part of my experience back at the end of 2023. Part of my experience was the breakdown of a friendship that absolutely floored me. Absolutely floored me. It had me literally on the bathroom floor in fetal position, wishing I was not here. It absolutely floored me, but it has also gone on to be one of the biggest learning curves of my life. And so it's at the point now where I do hold love and gratitude for that experience, but far out, it was gnarly, so gnarly in the midst of it. And thankfully, I have a pretty large toolkit. I've done a lot of this work in my life. And so the thing that kind of kept me hanging on throughout that experience was knowing that in some way, shape or form, trusting that in some way, shape or form, that experience was meant to be there. It was necessary for me and it was shaping me for what's to come. And that's the only, because I had the depth of trust in that way of being, that's the only thing that really got me through a very, very gnarly point in my life. But part of that dynamic was that, it was kind of like boundaries were put in place in a very harsh, very abrupt way where all communication was cut and there was no room for understanding the other person's experience. And this is what I'm raising in this conversation, is just an awareness around how we do things and why we do things. Because as we know from a GNM GHK context, a DHS is caused when someone is caught off guard. They are caught on the wrong foot. We are isolated. It's acute, so it comes on quickly. We weren't expecting it. And I believe that humanity has gotten to, this is a general comment, right, guys? But humanity has gotten to a point where we've actually lost a lot of the ability and the art of effective communication. And we are, like I said, starting to use boundaries, or I don't know if we're just starting or maybe it's been in place for a while, but boundaries are being used to bypass, and boundaries are being used as an escape route for an avoidance tactic for effective communication. And that moment, that cold cutting of that friendship definitely switched on or re-triggered some biological programs for me. I had both mental and physical symptoms right throughout that experience. And so, yeah, I guess what I'm just evoking here is a sense of invitation to responsibility about looking introvertly, looking inside to see when it's really appropriate to put a boundary in place and how we go about doing that. The way in which we go about doing that. Things can be done softly, gently, with conscious communication, and put in place in a way that doesn't cause great distress and hurt and challenge to the other people we're interacting with. Now, again, I have a deep trust in this. So there is the flip side to this, where I do believe that everything we go through in life has purpose and meaning, right? And I know that we cannot always work out, we can't be responsible for the way that people experience us and our behavior, but we can have some intention to it. We can have best interests at heart. And so, the question and the invitation is to really look at the areas of life that you're putting boundaries in place and ask where they're coming from. Are they coming from a place of, I'm just going to gently step back for a moment and regather myself and get some space around this, and letting others know, hey, I'm still here and open to communicate, but maybe I need a little bit. Maybe I need a little bit of time, and maybe I need a little bit of space. Delivering things gently. Or are you putting boundaries in place because you are running away, because you are avoiding, because you haven't developed communication skills and the art of dealing with conflict? And guess what? You can run from one conflict and 10 more are going to come and find you. And generally, they're bigger, more challenging conflicts than the first one you ran from in the first place. This is based on my own experience, and my experience of working with clients in this field is generally if they run from the small ones, the universe drops this big mother load right in front of their faces and is like, okay, well, you didn't listen to me the first 10 times, so here you go. So maybe that's motivation for some of you to look at what conflicts are you running from in your life. Now, I'm not talking about GNM/GHK conflicts here. I'm talking about interpersonal conflicts, places where you're setting boundaries, where if you're really, really real with yourself, you can see that that boundary is not in place as a bit of a buffer. It's not in place as a bit of a breathing space. It's in place because you're not dealing with your own conflicts. I was going to say another word there. I'm not allowed to say that on podcast. But you're not dealing with the stuff that you need to deal with. And then unfortunately, what happens is that if this is the case and you need to be really, really real, we need to be really, really real with ourselves. I still go through this process. Is that what are the implications for ourselves and for other people when we are putting those boundaries in place from a place of disempowerment, when we're putting those boundaries in place from a place of running and avoidance. And we really need to look at that because it can be incredibly impactful. We are, again, episode 1, creating that separation from each other. And that can have literal mental and physical implications in our own bodies and also that of those we interact with. And although we can't control how other people experience us, I do believe that we have a responsibility, especially once you know this knowledge. We talked about this with my students in the last cohort too. It's like, what is the responsibility of GNM/GHK? Once you know this knowledge and you know that you can impact the well-being of another person by the way that you act, the way that you speak, the way that you interact with that person, you can directly impact their well-being. That comes with a huge responsibility of knowing that. And it's actually one of the reasons, in my opinion, that a lot of people shy away from GNM/GHK. Even in the holistic health world, there is a really strong resistance sometimes to GNM/GHK because it is the ultimate invitation for both self-responsibility and responsibility and care for other individuals around us. So that's the invitation around boundaries. Check in with yourself. Look at your conflicts. Where are you running? Where are you hiding? Where are you avoiding? Where are you putting a boundary in place just to get a bit of space, just to get a bit of a buffer? And how are you communicating that with those that you're interacting with? It is a similar thing with Bandaids, with medications, with holistic practices. Are you dealing with the core conflict? Are you just putting a Band-Aid on to get a bit of comfort, to get a bit of space, to put a bit of a buffer in place? And are you going to rip that Band-Aid off tomorrow? Or are you going to leave that Band-Aid on there for 3 months? And guess what happens underneath the Band-Aid in 3 months' time? It gets all festery and skanky and gross, right? It's the exact same thing that happens with our conflicts. If we're slapping boundaries on and slapping Band-Aids on and leaving them there for a really long time, they're going to get festy and gross. So have a look at the places in your life, again, with symptoms, mental and physical as well. Where are you running? Where are you hiding? Where are you avoiding the conflict, hoping that the Band-Aid's just going to stay on there forever and not wanting to peek underneath? Like I said, my experience with this friendship breakdown was so intense at the time, but I also hold so much love and gratitude for it now, because now on the other side, there is the vision of what that was, the purpose of what that was in my life and where it's brought me to. And one of the really, really exciting things that it's brought me to, something I'm so inspired about right in this very moment, is one of the offerings that's coming in 2026, which is called Sophia's Circle, a return to biological sisterhood. And that has very much been inspired by this experience. This is going to be a collaborative project with another woman. And this offering is going to be all about understanding our biological drivers as women and why those biological drivers make us do the things that we do, why they make us quite mean to other women sometimes, why they put us into competition mode, why we let go the relationships we let go in the ways that we do sometimes, why other women let go relationships with us, and what we can do to start softening that. Because you would not believe the amount of women that I have in as clients whose mental and physical symptoms are linked to the breakdown of relationships or friendships with other women. It is huge, and I definitely know it was for me as well. It can instigate identity conflicts, self-devaluation conflicts, kidney collecting tubule conflicts. This is weight gain, fluid retention, so many other things. And so I really believe and feel deeply about women not only learning how to relate with men better again, which is part of the Freya offerings. Go check that out if you haven't yet. Not my course, but a course that I really support and assisted bringing into Australia. Freya is biological relationships between men and women. My offering, our offering, is women in friendships, in relationship, platonic relationship with other women, and how that can go wrong, why that goes wrong, what the impact is when it goes wrong, and how we can really soften that impact. Because I believe that if we are going to turn around humanity and the way that we interact with ourselves, it is going to be the woman that leads that. And this is not a feminist statement. This is a biological statement, because we know that the woman determines how things go. It is the man who will ultimately lead, but he will lead under the direction, under the request, under the energy of the woman. And when we're talking about humans coming back into connection with each other in this space as well, I believe it's going to be the women who lead that revolution, who lead that charge. It's us who goes first. So if we can learn how to have better relationships with men, better relationships with each other, learn when it's appropriate to put a boundary in place or not, and how to do that properly so we don't impact our physiology and others' physiology, then we can start turning things around and we can start becoming far more connected with each other again. And once humans are reconnected with self, with nature, with each other, the whole of life starts to open up and become easier as well. Because now we start to head back towards true community. And this is Sophia's Circle. This is like what really is community, because my opinion is also that we have drifted a really long way away from what true community actually is. And true community takes compromise. True community takes effective, artful communication. True community means we have to contribute. We have to bring value as much as we want to receive from that. And all of that is understandable through our biology. So once we understand the biology of women, we can understand, like I said, why we do those things and how to stop doing them and how to do them differently so that we can all come back to a place of connection. So that is boundaries and Bandaids. As said, they definitely have a time and place. I know, and I've been there myself, that sometimes in life there are points which are so uncomfortable mentally, physically, that we have to put that breathing space and that buffer in place to be able to regroup, regather, and really come back to what our inner truth is. Yes, they have a time and place, but please, an invitation to look at where perhaps those things have been in place too long, or whether they're being in place in a really harsh and unreasonable way, or where they might be impacting you or others in a way that is not working towards holistic well-being. Holistic, not just the individual, but holistic, the entire community and population around you. When the tribe is well, when the community is well, the individual is well. That's the way it works. And I believe that we, the women, will lead that revolution. Thank you for tuning in today. Love to hear your questions if you've got any around that, or if there's any parts of that you would like to hear me speak further to. Very, very juicy topic. Definitely a topic hot on my heart, and would love to see you guys in Sophia's Circle in 2026. Thank you for tuning in to Biological, the podcast. If today's episode offered a new perspective and inspired you, my encouragement for you is to explore what's behind those doors. When we understand the science behind our biology, we begin to relate to our bodies with clarity instead of fear. May you leave this episode feeling invigorated and reminded that your body and life are not malfunctioning. They are responding intelligently and meaningfully. Until next time, keep questioning, observing, and following the golden threads of life.